There was a time, not so long ago, when the American highway was ruled by giants. They weren't ships on the sea, but they looked and felt close to it. Long, gleaming bodies stretched across lanes of asphalt, engines that rumbled like distant thunder, and interiors so soft and wide that stepping inside felt less like climbing into a car and more like settling into a private lounge. They were called land yachts, and in the 1970s, they became symbols of a nation's pride and of a culture that believed bigger really was better. Tonight, we'll drift back into that era. We'll remember the colossal machines that once glided effortlessly down endless interstates, polished chrome flashing in the sun, vinyl tops glowing under streetlights, and the comforting hum of an AM radio filling the cabin. These were more than vehicles. They were companions of family vacations, quiet witnesses to late-night drives, and bold declarations of success parked proudly in suburban driveways. Welcome, dear friends, to Sleepy Town Radio, where we tell quiet stories for quiet hearts. Here, we slow down together, letting memory become a gentle guide into rest. And tonight's journey will take us through 20 of the longest, most unforgettable American cars of the 1970s, the true land yachts. From the opulent Chrysler Imperial to the family wagons that carried children and camping gear across summer highways, each one tells a story not only of design and power, but of the people who lived with them. So settle in. Let the road grow quiet in your mind. Let the sound of history soften like headlights fading into the dark. And together, we'll remember what it was like when cars became ships. There is a reason many still whisper the name Imperial with a kind of reverence. Among the grand machines of the 1970s, few could equal the presence of the 1973 Chrysler Imperial. At the time, it was the longest non-limousine American car built since the Second World War. A sweeping statement of confidence in an era when size and style defined the road. To see one glide past was to witness not merely a car, but a declaration. The Imperial carried itself with the grace of an ocean liner. Its distinctive fuselage body design, rounded, tapering, and impossibly wide, made the car seem as if it were borrowed from the world of aviation. From certain angles, it looked more like a passenger jet grounded on the boulevard than an automobile. Sunlight would ripple across its long hood and chrome accents, and for a brief moment, the street itself felt smaller in its presence. Inside, the Imperial spoke the language of indulgence. The seats were wrapped in Corinthian leather, a phrase that became iconic in its own right. To run a hand across those cushions was to feel luxury that, at the time, was associated only with the very best hotels or the finest private clubs. Passengers described the experience as gliding on clouds, and that was not mere exaggeration. With its soft suspension and heavy sound insulation, the Imperial turned even a rough road into a quiet, floating journey. Beneath that graceful body rested a heart of strength. Chrysler's 440 cubic inch, 7.2-liter V8 engine. It produced more than 200 horsepower, plenty to move the car's vast frame without effort. Owners often said that pressing the accelerator didn't feel like commanding speed, but like releasing stored power that was waiting patiently to carry them forward. It was not a car built for haste, but for steady, confident motion, the kind that reassured everyone on board that the road would bend to them. In its day, the Imperial was more than transportation. It was a status symbol. You might have seen it in the driveway of a lawyer's home or gliding quietly toward a country club. Businessmen favored it, as did families who wished to make a statement about their prosperity. And when the heavy doors closed with that satisfying thud, there was a sense of enclosure, of privacy, that made the world outside seem far away. The details were as impressive as the size. Chrome-plated buttons, real wood trim, a premium sound system that could fill the cabin with warm tones, and options like automatic climate control. All reminders that the Imperial was as close to a rolling sanctuary as the 1970s could offer. Long road trips in one of these cars became events of their own, where children stretched out in the back seat as the countryside drifted by, and adults leaned back into velvet-smooth comfort, speaking in quieter voices because the cabin hushed the world so well. And yet, the 1973 Imperial was also a swan song. It marked the final generation of Imperial as a standalone brand. In the years ahead, rising fuel prices and shifting tastes would bring the bigger is better philosophy to an end. But for that moment, for those who drove it, the Imperial stood as the last and perhaps greatest of its kind. To remember the Imperial is to remember what it felt like to live in a time when the road was wide, when the sky seemed endless, and when the very length of your car spoke of ambition and pride. On a crisp autumn morning, with the leaves just beginning to fall, you might imagine a businessman adjusting his tie, sliding behind the wheel, and turning the key. The engine rumbles awake, low and confident. He eases the car from the driveway, and for a few brief miles, he is not merely driving. He is commanding a ship across the pavement seas. The 1973 Chrysler Imperial was not just a car. It was a final salute to an age of grandeur, an age when America still believed that bigger meant better, and when a drive down the highway could feel like gliding across the sky. Among the great land yachts of the 1970s, few carried themselves with the quiet dignity of the Buick Electra 225. To many, it was more than just a car. It was the flagship of Buick, the largest and most commanding vehicle the company had ever placed upon American roads. Its length alone announced its presence. Even before the engine turned over, the Electra stood as a kind of monument to the decade's belief that luxury could also be immense. The 1975 Electra 225 was instantly recognizable by its broad honeycomb chrome grille, a face that gleamed proudly beneath the sun. Step inside, and the world softened. A deep red velvet interior greeted driver and passengers alike. The fabric was plush, almost theatrical, the kind of upholstery that absorbed sound and wrapped you in warmth. Even now, people recall the way it felt to sit there, as if the car itself was offering a velvet-lined embrace. The Electra was not only beautiful, but quietly innovative. In 1975, it became the very first General Motors car to offer an airbag system, a feature still rare and astonishing at the time. For families who placed their children in the back seat, this was no small comfort. Alongside the airbag came the convenience of power windows and a power driver's seat, modern luxuries that turned everyday driving into something almost indulgent. Despite its great size, the Electra moved with a kind of grace. The suspension was finely tuned to swallow the bumps and cracks of the road, leaving only the sensation of a gentle glide. Drivers would often remark that the car did not so much travel across highways as float upon them. the noise of the outside world fell away, replaced by the soft hum of tires and the faint whisper of the wind. For commuters, long drives became less of a burden. For families, the car became a second living room on wheels, a space where conversations stretched and music drifted lightly through the cabin. Buick offered a variety of color choices for both exterior and interior, which allowed owners to tailor their Electra to personal taste. Some preferred subdued earth tones that spoke of refinement, while others chose vibrant hues that made the car shine with unmistakable flair. Paired with the velvet or leather upholstery inside, each Electra became a reflection of its owner's sense of style. Under the hood rested Buick's dependable V8 engine, strong enough to carry the car's vast body with surprising ease. It was not the most fuel-efficient of machines. Few land yachts of that era were, but it did not need to be. The point was not frugality. It was presence. It was comfort. It was arriving not simply at your destination, but in a manner that left an impression. The Electra 225 found its place with large families who needed both space and dignity. It was the car that might sit outside a modest but comfortable home, ready for a summer road trip. Perhaps the radio inside played softly, an AM station carrying the music of the day, the gentle rise of brass and strings blending with the steady hum of the engine. Children leaned against one another in the back, lulled by the rhythm of the ride. Parents glanced at each other, knowing that, in this car, even long miles ahead could feel restful. Though time has passed and fuel crises have since reshaped the roads, the 1975 Buick Electra 225 remains a symbol of what once was. It was big, it was comfortable, and it was proud. A rolling portrait of American life in the mid-1970s. To remember it now is to recall a time when a car could be both a machine and a sanctuary. And when the world outside seemed hurried and restless, the Electra offered something rare, the gift of moving slowly, smoothly, and in quiet style. Among the many giants that roamed America's highways in the 1970s, the Oldsmobile 98, especially the 1974 model, stands tall as a car that blended refinement with sheer size. At over 234 inches in length, it matched the Buick Electra step for step, stretching itself into one of the longest cars of its time. And yet, the 98 was more than measurements and steel. It was a carefully built expression of luxury, confidence, and the quiet prosperity that so many families sought in that decade. The 1974 Oldsmobile 98 carried with it the distinctive Regency package, which elevated the already elegant sedan into something grander. From the outside, the lines were long and graceful, accented by chrome that caught the sun just so. Step closer, and you would notice details shaped by new safety regulations, large bumpers designed to withstand low-speed impacts. Even these practical additions seem to lengthen the car's profile, giving it an imposing, stately appearance. Inside, though, is where the Oldsmobile truly whispered its promises. Plush leather seating or soft velour awaited those who entered, with deluxe armrests and thick floor mats cushioning every step. Passengers had dual ashtrays, padded vinyl roofs overhead, and the quiet hum of power windows and locks, a set of conveniences that made the cabin feel closer to a private parlor than a simple automobile. For many, just closing the door and resting against those seats felt like leaving the outside world behind. Under its long hood lived Oldsmobile's legendary 455 rocket V8 engine. With cold air induction, It produced a robust 320 horsepower, enough strength to move the car's weight with confidence and a touch of eagerness. Pressing the accelerator meant feeling that deep surge, the kind that reassured you that the road ahead was yours. But the 98 wasn't about racing. It was about smoothness, with automatic climate control keeping the cabin steady and cruise control making long highway drives effortless. The rocket engine became less a shout of power and more a steady heartbeat, carrying families from city to suburb and from home to vacation. The Oldsmobile 98 quickly found favor with those who cared about appearances. Lawyers, doctors, and executives often selected the model for its balance of elegance and practicality. It was not just transportation, it was a symbol of where they stood in life. Parked in front of a large home or waiting outside a golf club, the 98 seemed to announce success with quiet assurance. Owners were not simply buying a car, they were buying into a lifestyle. Imagine for a moment a Saturday morning in the mid-1970s. The Oldsmobile sits in a sunlit driveway, its chrome polished, its long body reflecting the green of the lawn. The trunk holds a pair of golf clubs, while the front seat bears the faint scent of leather warmed by the sun. The driver turns the key, and the rocket V8 rumbles awake. Soon, the car is gliding toward a country club, every bump in the pavement absorbed by its tuned suspension, every mile quieted by insulation that muffled the outside world. To be inside was to be carried softly, securely, as if the journey itself was a kind of comfort, though the oil crisis of the decade would eventually cast shadows over these large machines. The 1974 Oldsmobile 98 remains a reminder of the years when bigger was indeed seen as better, and when elegance meant more than just design. It meant presence. It was not simply a car to get from one place to another. It was a space to live in, to enjoy, to remember. Even now, when one sees a 98 from that era, the memories return. A hand resting on a leather armrest, a soft radio playing through the speakers, children peering out the wide rear windows as the interstate stretched endlessly before them. The Oldsmobile 98 carried them all, quietly, comfortably, and with a grace that still lingers in the American imagination. If there was ever a car that captured the pure essence of 1970s American luxury, it was the Cadillac Fleetwood 60 Special. In the long line of land yachts that graced the decade, the Fleetwood stood as Cadillac's proud flagship, an unmistakable symbol of success, sophistication, and the desire to be noticed. Even from a distance, its enormous dimensions and powerful silhouette could not be mistaken for anything else. This was not just a car, it was a statement. Beneath the hood rested a massive 8.2-liter V8 engine paired with GM's turbo-hydromatic transmission. The numbers were impressive, but the true magic was in how it felt. The Fleetwood moved with quiet authority, its power delivered so smoothly that passengers rarely noticed the effort. From the driver's seat, it was less about speed and more about glide, an experience where even the longest stretches of interstate could feel like a gentle drift across calm waters. The interior, however, is where the Fleetwood truly became unforgettable. 6-way power-adjustable seats upholstered in wrinkle-free velvet turned each ride into a private retreat. The cushions invited you to sink in, to let your body rest against comfort designed not only for utility, but for indulgence. The smell of velvet, leather, and polished wood trim created an atmosphere unlike any other, part drawing room, part sanctuary. For those who could afford it, the Fleetwood 60 Special offered even more exclusivity. Some models included a divider window between driver and passenger compartments, a feature borrowed from limousines. This touch of privacy transformed the car into a rolling office, or perhaps a quiet sitting room where executives and dignitaries could hold conversations shielded from the outside world. With dual-zone air conditioning, even long summer drives could feel cool and effortless. And for leisure, there were amenities like an 8-track cassette player, filling the space with music of the time. Jazz, soft rock, or the gentle hum of crooners that matched the car's own quiet rhythm. To own a Fleetwood was to stand at the very top. This was the car of CEOs, politicians, and celebrities, the ones who wanted not only to travel in comfort, but to make an impression every time the door opened. The sound of that heavy door closing, the solid thud echoing like a seal of quality, became part of the ritual. And when the car rolled up to a hotel, a theater, or a government building, there was no mistaking who had arrived. Yet despite its grandeur, the Fleetwood was not simply about being seen. For passengers, it was about being cared for. Power steering and power brakes made handling the giant machine less intimidating. Plush suspension soaked up imperfections in the road, leaving only the sensation of drifting. Long conversations could unfold without interruption, and even silence felt rich, wrapped in velvet seats and muted by thick insulation. Imagine a late afternoon in 1975. A CEO steps out of his office tower in the fading light. His driver waits, standing by the Fleetwood, its chrome grille catching the last rays of the sun. The rear door opens, and as he settles into the velvet seat, the divider rises. Outside, the city hums with noise, but inside, there is only calm. Perhaps the faint strains of an 8-track recording play through the speakers, or perhaps there is only silence. Either way, the ride home feels less like a commute and more like a retreat. The Cadillac Fleetwood 60 Special was more than metal, fabric, and chrome. It was the embodiment of American confidence at its height, when success was measured not just by what you accomplished, but by what you arrived in. For many, it remains the very definition of the land yacht. Grand, indulgent, unforgettable. In the closing years of the 1970s, when the era of the great land yachts was drawing toward its twilight, the Lincoln Continental remained one of the finest examples of quiet power and grace on the American road. To see one glide by between 1977 and 1979 was to witness the presence of a car that carried not only its passengers, but an entire sense of tradition. The Continental had long been a rival to Cadillac, and in these final years of the decade, it proved that Ford's flagship could stand shoulder to shoulder with any luxury sedan of its time. The Continental of this period was immense, long, wide, and commanding, but its presence was softened by elegance. The body-on-frame construction gave it the strength and stability of a great ship, while its suspension was engineered to absorb bumps, noise, and vibration with ease. On the interstate, it became less a car and more a vessel. Passengers would often describe the sensation as gliding, the kind of ride where miles slipped away quietly. The hum of the highway muted until it was little more than a whisper beneath the cabin stillness. Inside, the Continental was a place of comfort. The interior space seemed endless, designed so that every passenger could stretch their legs and rest as though they were at home. Upholstery choices ranged from soft leather to richly textured fabrics, and each seat was built with a depth and padding that seemed to invite you to stay just a little longer. Automatic climate control, power seats, and advanced stereo systems for the time transformed the car into something more than a vehicle. It was a moving lounge, a private room on wheels where conversations stretched and silences felt unhurried. The exterior colors of the Continental reflected its dignified character. Rather than bright, flashy tones, owners often chose navy blues, earth browns, silvers, and muted greens. These subdued shades lent the car a quiet elegance, a kind of refined confidence. The design evolved slightly from year to year. Tail lights shifting, grills reshaped, windows reimagined. But the essence remained the same. A vehicle built to convey sophistication without excess. For families, the Continental meant comfort on long drives. Imagine the scene. A summer evening, the car gliding down the interstate, headlights stretching across the pavement, children dozing in the back, leaning against wide leather seats, their small reflections flickering in the glass. Parents in the front, one hand resting lightly on the wheel, the other adjusting the AM/FM stereo to catch a favorite song. The road outside may have been endless, but inside, time seemed to slow. For those of higher status, politicians, business leaders, or community figures, the Continental carried a different kind of meaning. It was not ostentatious, but it was unmistakable. Arriving in one conveyed steadiness, wealth, and good taste. When it rolled up to an event, the sound of the heavy doors closing, the muffled, confident thud, spoke volumes without a single word. The 1977-1979 Continental may not have been the flashiest car of its era, but it was among the most respected. It embodied everything people loved about the land yachts: size, comfort, presence, and a sense of being carried rather than driven. And while its bulk made parking in tight city spaces a challenge, once it was moving, all doubt disappeared. The Continental was never meant for cramped streets. It belonged on the open road, where it could stretch its frame and prove what true American luxury once meant. To remember it now is to recall a moment when cars were not only transportation, but symbols of dignity. The Lincoln Continental of the late 1970s was one of the last to hold on to that dream. A floating giant, built for comfort, built for grace, built to make every mile feel like part of something greater. If the Lincoln Continental sedan was the quiet diplomat of the highway, then the Continental Mark V was its glamorous cousin, the one who drew stares wherever it went. Produced between 1977 and 1979, this was one of the last true personal luxury coupes of its era, and it remains a symbol of opulence and individuality. Where other land yachts sought to blend in with their stately presence, the Mark V seemed destined to stand out. The first thing anyone noticed was its length. At over 230 inches, the Mark V was longer than many modern extended SUVs, its hood stretching endlessly forward before tapering to the signature Rolls-Royce-inspired grille. But unlike its predecessor, which favored softer, rounded lines, the Mark V embraced sharp edges and bold geometry. Its profile looked sculpted, deliberate, and undeniably modern for the late 1970s. Even today, a Mark V parked under city lights carries an unmistakable silhouette, broad, angular, and confident. Inside, the car was no less striking. The seats were described by many as the most comfortable of their time. Deep cushions of leather or velour that seemed to cradle rather than simply support. Driving one meant being enveloped in a softness that encouraged long journeys, the kind where you could let the road unwind beneath you without ever growing weary. Some models even came with chandelier-style interior lighting and richly veneered wood trims, transforming the cabin into something closer to a private lounge than an automobile. What made the Mark V even more unique were the famous designer series editions. Lincoln collaborated with some of the most renowned names in fashion: Cartier, Bill Blass, Givenchy, and Pucci, to produce limited-run cars with exclusive color schemes, upholstery, and trim. A Cartier edition might feature understated elegance with soft grays and fine detailing, while a Pucci edition leaned toward bold colors and dramatic flair. Each version was like a tailored suit or evening gown, making the Mark V not just transportation, but a collectible expression of personal style. Underneath its glamorous skin lay a capable V8 engine, delivering power that matched its presence. It was never meant to be a sports car. The Mark V wasn't about speed in a straight line. It was about smoothness, refinement, and the reassuring growl that came when the accelerator was pressed. With power steering, power brakes, and luxury features like automatic air conditioning and premium stereo systems, the Mark V transformed long drives into indulgent experiences. The people who drove these cars often matched their spirit. Celebrities, fashion enthusiasts, and public figures gravitated toward the Mark V because it spoke their language. It was bold, elegant, and slightly theatrical. Imagine a neon-lit evening in 1978, the car pulling up outside a downtown theater, its long doors open wide, and a well-dressed couple steps out, the car's glossy paint reflecting the glow of marquees and neon. Few vehicles could rival the drama of such a scene, and yet, for all its extravagance, the Mark V was still a land yacht at heart. On the open highway, it delivered the same gliding serenity that defined the era. Passengers could relax as the suspension absorbed every imperfection, and the vastness of the interior seemed to soften the world outside. For some, it was the perfect escape, a cocoon of style and comfort, moving effortlessly through the night. The Continental Mark V was more than just another car on the list of America's longest. It was a farewell to the age of excess, one of the last great coupes that dared to be unapologetically large, unapologetically luxurious, and unapologetically American. Even now, it lingers in memory like the closing notes of a favorite song, bold, beautiful, and impossible to forget. In the crowded world of American luxury cars, few names carried the quiet dignity of the Chrysler New Yorker. From 1974 through 1978, it remained a steadfast presence on the highway, a car that spoke not with brashness, but with a kind of timeless elegance. Where some of its competitors embraced new plastics, shifting trends, or bold reinventions, the New Yorker held on to tradition, keeping its wide chrome grille and polished metal trim. That choice alone set it apart, making it feel more like a classic suit that never went out of style, rather than a fleeting fad. The New Yorker was, in every sense, a car for those who valued consistency and refinement. Its proportions were grand, its lines long and confident, and its bright work gleamed as if meant to last forever. For many, it was the perfect answer to an age of change, a reassuring anchor in a decade that sometimes seemed to be shifting beneath everyone's feet. Inside, the New Yorker carried on the same spirit of quiet dignity. Plush velvet or premium leather seats welcomed passengers with a softness that rivaled a fine living room. The interior felt spacious, its wide cabin lined with subtle accents that evoked comfort more than flash. This was a car built not only for the driver, but for every person fortunate enough to settle into its seats. On long trips, the suspension was tuned to absorb the roughness of American roads, giving each journey the feeling of gliding on air. Under the hood, the car carried Chrysler's reliable V8 engines. They were strong enough to move its considerable weight with ease, though performance was never the main story here. The New Yorker wasn't about speed or raw acceleration. It was about confidence, the knowledge that you could set out on a long interstate drive and arrive feeling refreshed rather than fatigued. It was the promise of a first-class experience, delivered mile after mile. Owners of the New Yorker were often people with established lives, professionals, business leaders, and families who wanted reliability wrapped in tradition. They weren't chasing fashion. They were choosing stability, refinement, and a kind of understated prestige. It was the car of a doctor heading home after a late evening at the hospital, or a middle-aged couple on their way to a dinner party. The New Yorker's chrome grille catching the glow of street lamps as it rolled quietly down suburban streets. Culturally, the car often appeared in television and films, not because it shouted for attention, but because it represented luxury in a way that felt familiar and believable. Its presence in a scene said as much about the characters inside as it did about the era itself. When a New Yorker pulled up, it suggested respectability, tradition, and a steady hand on the wheel of life, and perhaps that was its greatest strength. In a decade where fuel crises and shifting regulations forced many automakers to cut corners or experiment in directions that felt uncertain, the Chrysler New Yorker reminded Americans of what had always mattered: comfort, space, and the subtle glow of chrome against a fading evening sky. It was less about making a scene and more about preserving a way of life. For those who drove it, the New Yorker wasn't simply transportation. It was a statement, a promise of dignity in motion, and a sanctuary on wheels. On quiet nights, as the car slipped down an empty stretch of highway, passengers could look out through wide windows and see the world pass gently by. The hum of the V8 was steady, the ride was calm, and the experience was unmistakably that of a land yacht, graceful, enduring, and proudly American. By the mid-1970s, the American dream still had a way of expressing itself on four wheels, and few cars captured that spirit quite like the 1976 Cadillac Eldorado. This was not just another large automobile. It was Cadillac's boldest personal luxury coupe, and in many ways, it became the swan song of an era when size, style, and power flowed together without apology. What made the '76 Eldorado stand out was its sheer presence. Long and commanding, with a profile that seemed to stretch endlessly, it carried a confidence that no compact car could ever match. and under its vast hood rested one of the largest engines ever placed in a regular production passenger car, a massive 500 cubic inch 8.2-liter V8. This engine didn't scream with reckless aggression. Instead, it whispered power, delivering smooth, effortless acceleration that made the driver feel untouchable on the open road. Even as America edged closer to new fuel economy regulations, the Eldorado held onto that sense of the last of the giants. The convertible version was especially iconic. With the top folded down, the Eldorado seemed to belong to the wide boulevards of California or the sunlit roads of Florida, where movie stars and musicians often drove them in style. You could almost picture the soft glow of a late afternoon sun, the ocean breeze catching the edges of a silk scarf, and the low purr of that Cadillac engine carrying someone toward an evening gala or a coastal getaway. Inside, the Eldorado was a rolling sanctuary of comfort. Wide leather seats, deeply cushioned and inviting, created the feeling of a private lounge. Chrome accents and wood grain trim completed the illusion of wealth and warmth. Many were fitted with automatic climate control, power windows, and power seats, conveniences that reminded passengers they were traveling in Cadillac's world, where refinement was always a given. But what set the Eldorado apart wasn't just its equipment. It was its ability to create an atmosphere. Driving one was less about rushing from place to place and more about savoring the ride itself. Owners described it as commanding a floating living room where time seemed slow and the road ahead felt like an invitation to dream. For celebrities of the era, the Eldorado was as much a fashion statement as a form of transportation. It appeared in films, in music videos, and in photographs of the rich and famous. But it was not reserved only for Hollywood. Across the country, successful professionals and proud families made the Eldorado their own, often parking them proudly in suburban driveways where their gleaming chrome reflected the neighborhood's streetlights. Culturally, the 1976 Eldorado has become a symbol of the end of an age. It was one of the last Cadillacs to carry such a massive V8 before regulations and energy crises pushed automakers towards smaller, more restrained designs. In many ways, it marked the closing chapter of America's romance with the land yacht. Those colossal machines that turned highways into stages and everyday drives into events. Even now, decades later, seeing one glide down a street is enough to stir memory and wonder. The long hood, the squared-off rear, the unmistakable Cadillac crest, all of it evokes a time when cars weren't just built, but crafted to embody aspiration itself. The 1976 Eldorado remains a rolling monument, not only to Cadillac's engineering, but to the very spirit of the 1970s. It was bold, extravagant, and unapologetically American. And though the age of the giants would soon fade, the Eldorado's legacy endures, like a golden sunset on a long summer evening, forever tied to a time when luxury still meant size, style, and the freedom of the open road. Among the towering sedans and sleek coupes of the 1970s, there was another kind of land yacht, one that stretched itself across driveways not for prestige alone, but for family, practicality, and memory. The 1975 Buick Estate Wagon was just that. It was one of the largest and most luxurious station wagons America had ever built. A car that combined the spirit of Buick's elegance with the needs of everyday life. At nearly 19 feet long, the estate wagon had a presence that could not be ignored. Its sheer size rivaled many sedans, and yet it was unmistakably a wagon. Broad, confident, and unmistakably American. The exterior was often trimmed with wood grain paneling along the sides, a touch that made it stand out in suburban neighborhoods. Chrome bumpers framed its face and rear, while Buick's distinctive grille gave it a touch of class that elevated it beyond a simple family hauler. Inside, the estate wagon was expansive. With 3 rows of seating, it could carry 8 or even 9 passengers, depending on the configuration. The second-row bench folded flat, and in the back, children often delighted in riding rear-facing in the third row, watching the world disappear behind them as the highway stretched on. To sit there, waving at the cars that followed, was an experience unique to the wagons of this era, something remembered fondly by those who grew up in them. Perhaps its most memorable feature was the innovative clamshell tailgate. The rear glass slid up into the roof, while the tailgate itself retracted beneath the floor, creating an open, walk-in access to the cargo area. For families packing camping gear, beach supplies, or grocery bags from the local market, it was nothing short of ingenious. It made the estate wagon as practical as it was impressive. Under its long hood, the estate wagon carried Buick's V8 engines, including the powerful 455 cubic inch option. While the car was heavy, the engine moved it with confidence, especially on the wide interstates it was meant to roam. But again, like so many land yachts, it wasn't about speed. It was about the journey. Smooth suspension and Buick's quiet ride engineering made long drives feel less like chores and more like gentle adventures. For many, the estate wagon was tied to family memories. Picture a summer morning in 1975, the driveway filled with the sound of suitcases closing and children's voices echoing with excitement. A father loads fishing poles, coolers, and canvas tents into the back, while the clamshell tailgate swallows it all with ease. A mother checks the picnic basket, ensuring sandwiches and lemonade are packed tight. Soon, the family piles into the car, kids sprawled across the wide seats, the radio humming softly with a song of the season, and the Buick estate wagon pulls onto the open road. Every mile carries them further from routine and deeper into the timeless rhythm of a family vacation. The estate wagon was more than a tool. It was a stage for memories, road trips to national parks, evenings at drive-in theaters, weekends at the lake. It was a car that lived not only in garages, but in photo albums, where it appeared in the background of childhood snapshots and holiday gatherings. Though fuel crises and the rise of smaller cars would eventually shrink wagons out of favor, the 1975 Buick estate wagon remains one of the grandest reminders of an era when bigger was better, and when family cars could be every bit as commanding as the sedans and coupes beside them. To see one today is to remember a simpler promise, that the road could bring families closer together, and that the journey mattered as much as the destination. The Buick estate wagon wasn't just a wagon. It was America's rolling memory box, carrying laughter, stories, and the spirit of togetherness down every sunlit mile. By the middle of the 1970s, few cars spoke the language of American success as fluently as the Cadillac Coupe DeVille. The name itself carried weight, echoing through neighborhoods, country clubs, and downtown boulevards as the very definition of luxury. For 1975, The Coupe DeVille was not simply a car. It was an institution, a rolling symbol of Cadillac's mastery of size, style, and prestige. This was Cadillac's two-door flagship, and yet it stretched well past 220 inches in length, a reminder that coupe in America could still mean a machine the size of a modern truck. Its silhouette was unmistakable, a long hood that seemed to reach toward the horizon, a squared-off roofline with crisp edges, and a rear deck broad enough to suggest permanence. Chrome trim glinted along its sides, catching the sunlight in a way that drew glances from passers-by. Parked outside a fine restaurant or theater, the Coupe DeVille commanded attention before a word was spoken. Step inside, and the experience deepened. The interior could be ordered in fine leather or in Cadillac's celebrated velour, both materials chosen to cradle passengers in softness. The front seats were wide, inviting two people to sit comfortably with room to spare. The rear bench was just as generous, allowing adults to stretch their legs in comfort rarely found in other coupes. The dashboard carried the hallmarks of the era: faux wood trim, padded vinyl, and gauges that glowed softly in the evening light. Power locks, power seats, and automatic climate control were standard fare, reminders that Cadillac understood luxury as convenience as much as comfort. Underneath it all lay the heart of a giant, the 500 cubic inch Cadillac V8, among the largest engines ever fitted to an American car. While the oil crisis of the early 1970s cast shadows on such engines, those who drove the Coupe DeVille knew that its true gift was not efficiency, but ease. The big V8 delivered torque with a gentle push, moving the car's vast body forward with grace. It wasn't about racing, it was about gliding, about the sense that no matter how far the road stretched, the Cadillac would carry you there without effort. The Coupe DeVille was the choice of those who valued presence, but wanted it wrapped in elegance rather than ostentation. Imagine, for a moment, a New York evening in 1975. Outside a high-end restaurant, a Coupe DeVille rests under glowing street lamps. Its chrome sparkles against the night, and when the door opens, the scent of leather drifts into the cool air. The couple who step out, dressed in evening attire, fit perfectly with the image of the car itself. Refined, confident, timeless. For others, the Coupe DeVille was tied to quieter memories. It might have been the car that carried a family to weddings, graduations, or holidays. Children remember the vast seats, the way the Cadillac floated over potholes and bumps, and the sound of the radio playing softly as the city rolled past the windows. To them, it wasn't just a car. It was the background of cherished moments, stitched into memory by the smell of leather and the sight of Cadillac's crest gleaming on the hood. By 1975, Cadillac had perfected the art of building land yachts, and the Coupe DeVille was among its purest expressions. It was large, it was luxurious, and it was proud. But beyond its statistics, beyond its chrome and horsepower, the Coupe DeVille carried something deeper. It carried the feeling of having arrived, of belonging to an era when success was measured not only by what you achieved, but by what you drove. Even now, when one sees a Coupe DeVille from that era gliding down the road, it carries the same quiet power. The world may have changed, but the impression lingers, of a car that defined an age, and of the people who once lived their milestones in its shadow. At the dawn of the 1970s, before the oil crisis would cast its long shadow across the automotive world, the Imperial Crown stood proudly as Chrysler's finest achievement in luxury. The name, Imperial, had always meant something more than just a car. It was Chrysler's declaration that it, too, could stand alongside Cadillac and Lincoln at the very top of the American hierarchy. And in 1970, the Crown embodied everything that era held dear: size, presence, comfort, and power, woven into a machine that seemed to float more than it drove. The Imperial Crown was a massive automobile. Stretching nearly 19 feet in length, it carried itself with a kind of quiet confidence. The front grille, broad, vertical, and shimmering in chrome, seemed less like the face of a car and more like the facade of a stately building. The long hood swept forward as if it had no end, while the squared-off roofline and wide rear fenders gave it the authority of a ship moving through calm waters. This was Chrysler at its boldest, unafraid to build a land yacht every bit as grand as its rivals. Under the hood, the Imperial Crown carried Chrysler's famous 440 cubic inch V8. Known for its strength, the 440 delivered smooth waves of power with little effort. Owners often remarked that pressing the accelerator didn't feel like urging the car forward. It felt more like commanding it to glide. And glide it did. The suspension soaked up imperfections in the road until passengers could almost forget they were in motion at all. On the interstate, the Crown was a sanctuary, the hum of its engine blending with the rhythm of the highway until both became background music to conversation, reflection, or simple quiet. Inside, the Imperial Crown continued the theme of indulgence. The seats, wide and sofa-like, were built less like chairs and more like cushions for an evening of comfort. Trimmed in fine leather or plush cloth, they invited passengers to sink back and stay a while. The dashboard carried subtle wood accents and padded vinyl, framing gauges that glowed softly at night. Power windows, power seats, and automatic climate control, all standard, reminded occupants that this was not a car built for compromise. It was built to offer the very best Chrysler could imagine. But beyond its equipment, the Imperial Crown had a presence that words can only begin to describe. Imagine a quiet suburban morning in 1970. The sun is just beginning to rise, casting its golden reflection across the polished hood of an Imperial parked in the driveway. A neighbor pauses as he walks by, taking in the sheer scale of the car, its chrome sparkling in the early light. The owner steps outside, coffee in hand, and slides behind the wheel. With a soft turn of the key, the big V8 murmurs to life, its voice steady and sure. Soon the car glides down the street, its long frame cutting a graceful silhouette against the dawn. In many ways, the Imperial Crown was the last of its kind. Within just a few years, the fuel crisis would make such cars seem indulgent, even irresponsible. But in 1970, there was still room for dreams, still space on the highway for giants that measured luxury in inches and weight in tons. The Crown represented an era when America still believed bigger was better, and when comfort was defined not by restraint, but by abundance. Today, when one sees a 1970 Imperial Crown, its grille gleaming, its roofline stately, it carries with it the echo of a world that once was. A world where the open road stretched endlessly, gas was cheap, and the idea of gliding across the country in a rolling living room seemed not only possible, but ideal. The Imperial Crown remains a monument to that vision, a reminder of how grand the American automobile could be before the tides of history turned. By 1976, station wagons had become the backbone of American family life. Among them, the Dodge Monaco wagon stood apart, not for its flash or extravagance, but for its quiet rarity. Fewer than 6,000 were produced that year, making it a hidden treasure in the vast ocean of land yachts. And yet, for those who owned one, the Monaco wagon became more than a car. It became the vessel of family stories, a moving sanctuary that carried laughter, music, and countless miles of memory. The Monaco wagon was long, low, and practical, yet still carried the dignified presence of the Dodge Monaco line. Many came adorned with simulated wood grain panels along the flanks, bordered by chrome strips that gleamed beneath the sun. The front carried Dodge's confident grille, squared and assertive, while the rear tailgate spoke to utility, a reminder that this car was built as much for hauling groceries and camping gear as for gliding down interstates. Inside, the Monaco wagon felt more like a living room on wheels than mere transportation. The wide bench seats were upholstered in patterned cloth or vinyl, often accented with faux wood trim along the dashboard and door panels. Step into its cabin, and there was a sense of familiarity, a place where children could stretch out with coloring books or play quiet games, while parents settled into the front seat with the soft hum of AM radio filling the silence. For many children, the magic of the Monaco wagon was found in the back. The third-row seat, often rear-facing, created a world of its own. There, kids could watch the highway unfurl behind them, waving at passing truck drivers or counting cars as the family made its way toward vacations, reunions, or quiet weekends by the lake. The feeling of sitting back there, untethered, free, and gazing out through that wide glass, became a defining memory of childhood in the 1970s. Under the hood, the Monaco carried Dodge's V8 engines, offering both strength and reliability. It was not built for speed, nor for glamour, but rather for endurance. It was a car meant to shoulder the weight of everyday life, grocery runs on weekdays, little league practices on Saturday mornings, and cross-country trips in the summer. Its ride was steady, its suspension forgiving, and its hum a constant companion on roads that stretched endlessly westward. Culturally, the Dodge Monaco is remembered today as a rare blend of practicality and luxury. Its scarcity has given it a kind of mythical aura, but in its time, it was a quiet worker, a car chosen by families who valued space, comfort, and just a touch of refinement. It wasn't ostentatious, but it was dependable, handsome, and warm in its own way. Picture it: a warm evening in 1976. The sun is setting low, painting the neighborhood streets in amber light. A Dodge Monaco wagon pulls away from a driveway, children pressed against the rear glass, their voices ringing with excitement. In the front, the parents share a quiet glance, knowing the road ahead will carry not just the weight of the car, but the weight of all the small, beautiful moments that make up a family's story. By 1973, Mercury had carved out a comfortable place for itself, positioned between Ford's practicality and Lincoln's grandeur. And sitting proudly in that middle ground was the Mercury Marquis, a full-sized sedan that carried dignity without pretense, offering both comfort and presence to those who chose it. The Marquis, particularly in the early 70s, was built to compete directly with Ford's LTD, yet it carried its own personality, subtly refined, quietly confident, and undeniably spacious. The 73 Marquis stretched over 220 inches in length, a reminder that even Mercury's family car shared the dimensions of a modern limousine. Its lines were broad and squared, with a stately chrome grille that gave the front end a serious expression. The roofline, crisp and formal, seemed designed to suggest respectability, perfect for the suburban homeowner, the small business owner, or the retired couple who wanted something substantial without stepping into Cadillac or Lincoln territory. Inside, the Marquis offered exactly what buyers of the time wanted: wide velour bench seats that seemed to swallow you in softness, door panels dressed with faux wood grain, and a dashboard that glowed warmly at night. Mercury understood that its drivers weren't looking for flash. They wanted comfort, the kind of comfort that made long Sunday drives effortless, that made trips to the lake or the mountains feel like extensions of home. The velour interiors became one of the Marquis' most beloved features. Unlike leather, which could be hot in summer or cold in winter, velour kept a steady warmth and softness year-round. Families remember how children could curl up in the back seat during evening drives, lulled by the hum of the engine and the glow of passing streetlights. Parents remember how easily the car absorbed the bumps of worn highways, giving the illusion that the road itself had been smoothed beneath its tires. Power came from Mercury's big V8s, including the 429 and later the 460 cubic inch engines, ample strength to move such a large body with grace. Yet it was never about speed. The Marquis wasn't built to race. It was built to glide, to carry its passengers steadily and calmly, like a ship moving across quiet waters. Imagine, for a moment, a summer weekend in 1973. A Mercury Marquis pulls into a resort town, its chrome catching the afternoon sun. Children in the back seat press against the windows, eager to catch their first glimpse of the swimming pool. The trunk, wide enough to swallow luggage, coolers, and golf clubs, has been packed since dawn. As the family steps out, the car rests in the lot like a silent guardian, its presence steady and sure. For some, the Marquis was never just transportation. It was part of the rhythm of daily life, taking families to church on Sundays, to vacations on the coast, to weddings and graduations. In those moments, it faded into the background, but the memories remained. The smell of velour, the sound of the AM radio, the gentle sway of the suspension as the car carried its precious cargo home. Today, when one sees a 73 Mercury Marquis, its square body, its long hood, its calm and measured demeanor, it stands as a reminder of a time when comfort was measured in inches, when the open road was best traveled at an easy pace, and when even a car designed for the middle market could feel like a land yacht. The year was 1972, and the American highway was still ruled by the great ships of steel and chrome. Among them, the Lincoln Continental Mark IV stood out, not only for its sheer size, stretching over 228 inches from bumper to bumper, but for the quiet air of refinement it carried. It was not simply a car. It was a statement, a symbol of taste and elegance in an age when bigger is better, was the rule of the road. The Mark IV followed on the heels of the Mark III, keeping its long hood, squared-off edges, and bold stance, but it refined the design even further. The car's most distinctive feature was its Rolls-Royce-inspired grille, tall and commanding, a face that seemed to announce its presence before the horn ever sounded. At the rear, the iconic Continental spare tire hump on the deck lid reminded you of the Lincoln tradition, a detail that had become part of the brand's very identity. But perhaps what truly set the Mark IV apart were the designer additions introduced during its run. Lincoln partnered with names that carried weight in the world of luxury: Cartier, Bill Blass, Pucci, and Gucci. Each edition offered unique color palettes, trims, and finishes, transforming the Mark IV from a luxury automobile into a moving piece of art. In an era of self-expression, owning one of these cars wasn't just about getting from place to place. It was about arriving with style, about telling the world that you valued refinement in every detail of life. Step inside, and the experience was no less impressive. Plush leather or velour interiors invited you to sink in and forget the world outside. The dashboard was broad, with elegant wood tone accents, while hidden lighting gave the cabin a gentle glow at night. For passengers, the back seat felt almost like a private lounge, the ride softened by Lincoln's suspension system, tuned to glide over uneven pavement as though the car floated on air. The Mark IV's engine, a 460 cubic inch V8, delivered power with calm assurance. It wasn't about roaring down highways. It was about smooth, steady acceleration, the kind that allowed the driver to merge effortlessly, pass confidently, and cruise endlessly. To drive a Mark IV was to feel insulated from the chaos of the outside world, carried along in a cocoon of quiet luxury. Imagine a couple in the early 1970s driving their Mark IV along the Florida coast. The evening sun dips low over the horizon, glinting off the ocean waves. The white lines of the highway blur beneath the long hood, while inside, the soft strains of a jazz record play on the 8-track. In that moment, the car is more than a machine. It is part of the memory itself, a backdrop to life's quiet, golden hours. Today, the 1972 Mark IV is remembered as one of the most elegant land yachts of its time. It embodied the idea that cars could be more than transportation. They could be symbols of aspiration, rolling monuments to the era's belief in style, space, and the luxury of taking the long way home. At the dawn of the 1970s, Buick introduced a car that embodied both strength and elegance, the Electra 225. Affectionately known as the Deuce and a Quarter, it wasn't just a car, it was a symbol of quiet confidence. Measuring over 227 inches long, it was every bit the definition of a land yacht, and yet it carried itself with a kind of understated grace that set Buick apart. The Electra's name had always been tied to luxury, but in 1970, it reached a peak. Beneath the hood was the mighty 455 cubic inch V8, one of the largest engines ever put into an American production car. It offered raw power, the kind that could move its massive frame with ease. Yet what drivers often remember most is not the force, but the smoothness. Press the accelerator, and the car didn't lurch forward. It glided as though the road had been made for it alone. The styling of the 1970 Electra was both commanding and refined. A wide chrome grille stretched across the front, flanked by quad headlamps that seemed to peer steadily down the highway. The sides were clean, long, and unbroken, lines that emphasized the car's extraordinary length. At the rear, vertical taillights stood like sentinels, giving the car a stately presence, whether parked in a suburban driveway or pulling up to a downtown theater. Inside, Buick's promise of comfort came to life. Plush seats, available in velour or leather, were as soft as living room furniture. The dashboard was broad, its instruments neatly laid out, with wood grain accents that gave a touch of warmth. Slide into the Electra, close the heavy door with its reassuring thud, and the outside world seemed to melt away. It was a sanctuary on wheels, the kind of car where conversations unfolded slowly, and long trips seemed to end too soon. For many families, the Electra 225 was part of life's rituals. Sunday drives after church, with the AM radio tuned to soft music, vacations to the mountains, luggage stacked neatly in the cavernous trunk, high school prom nights when young men borrowed the keys from their fathers and felt, for the first time, what it meant to arrive in style. The Electra wasn't flashy like a Cadillac, nor as opulent as a Lincoln. It didn't need to be. It was Buick's way of saying that true luxury was quiet, confident, and lasting. Picture a summer evening in 1970. The sun is setting over the plains, casting a golden glow across the fields. A Buick Electra cruises down the highway, its V8 humming low and steady. In the back seat, children doze against the velour, while up front, their parents sit in contented silence, the road stretching endlessly before them. It is a scene that belongs to its time, yet still lingers in memory, calm, steady, and full of promise. Today, the 1970 Electra 225 remains one of the great symbols of Buick's golden age. It carried both the weight and the elegance of its era, a perfect blend of power and luxury. And for those who knew it, the deuce and a quarter was more than just a car. It was a chapter of life itself, written across the highways of America. By 1976, the American highway was alive with the glow of headlights and the rhythm of V8 engines. Among the many giants of that era, the Ford Thunderbird stood apart, not just for its size, but for the air of prestige it carried. The Thunderbird had been introduced 2 decades earlier as a personal luxury car, and by the mid-1970s it had evolved into something far grander. The 1976 model was long, wide, and unmistakably bold, a rolling testament to the decade's love of chrome, comfort, and commanding presence. Stretching more than 225 inches, the Thunderbird of this era was one of the largest cars Ford ever produced. Its broad hood seemed to go on forever, leading the eye to a sharply defined front grille that gleamed with polished chrome. Twin headlamps sat like watchful eyes, giving the car a steady, confident expression. Along the sides, the lines were smooth and dignified, while the rear fenders swept gently toward the taillights, as if sculpted to remind drivers of the car's strength. Inside, the Thunderbird offered a world of comfort that few cars could match. Wide bucket seats wrapped in soft vinyl or velour gave the driver and passengers the feeling of being cradled in luxury. The dash, accented with faux wood trim, stretched broadly across the cabin. At night, the glow of the instrument panel cast a warm light, while optional interior lamps illuminated the car's spacious interior. It was a place where long drives turned into quiet conversations, and where music from the 8-track player filled the air like a private soundtrack for the road ahead, and the music mattered. For many, the memory of the Thunderbird is tied not only to the car itself, but to the songs that played within it. Imagine a young couple in 1976 sliding a Bee Gees tape into the 8-track player. As You Should Be Dancing comes alive through the speakers, the car glides smoothly down the road, chrome catching the glow of passing streetlights. The Thunderbird wasn't built for speed alone. It was built for presence. To sit behind its wheel was to feel for just a moment that the road belonged to you. Beneath the hood, Ford offered its 460 cubic inch V8, an engine that could move the car's massive frame with quiet assurance. It wasn't a muscle car's kind of power. It was something calmer, more deliberate, like a steady heartbeat, carrying the car forward mile after mile. The Thunderbird was less about racing toward the horizon and more about enjoying the journey itself. Families remember it as a car for special occasions, for trips into the city or Sunday dinners with relatives. Parked outside a restaurant or theater, its chrome reflected the neon lights of 1970s America, making it impossible to ignore. For others, it was a dream realized. The kind of car you aspired to own, not because it shouted, but because it spoke with quiet confidence. Today, the 1976 Thunderbird is remembered as one of the icons of Ford's luxury line. It combined the grandeur of a land yacht with the intimacy of a personal luxury coupe, bridging two worlds in a way few cars could. And for those who once drove it, or even just rode in its wide seats, the memory of that chrome-laden giant lives on, etched into the soundtrack of an era when the highway was wide, the nights were long, and the Thunderbird carried you through them all. By the late 1970s, one car more than any other came to symbolize the American family road trip, the Ford Country Squire. The 1978 model was not only one of the longest wagons Ford ever built, but also one of the most recognizable. With its faux wood paneling running the length of its massive body, the Country Squire wasn't just transportation. It was an icon of suburban life, a moving portrait of the American dream. Measuring nearly 225 inches from bumper to bumper, the Country Squire had presence. Its broad chrome grille gleamed proudly, flanked by hidden headlamps that revealed themselves only when needed. The sides were paneled in that signature wood grain vinyl, an illusion of tradition and rustic charm that spoke to family values, even while sitting in the driveway of a modern cul-de-sac. It was a curious blend, part station wagon, part rolling lodge, equal parts utility and elegance. Step inside, and you entered a world designed for families. The interior was cavernous, with 3 rows of seating that could hold 8, sometimes 9 passengers. The rear-facing third row, beloved by children, gave kids the rare thrill of watching the world recede behind them. The seats were wrapped in vinyl or cloth, durable enough to withstand spilled sodas, melted ice cream, and the scuff of summer sneakers. And when the tailgate folded down, it became a platform for picnics, fishing trips, or simply unloading bags of groceries from the local A&P. Beneath the hood, the 1978 Country Squire often carried Ford's mighty 460 cubic inch V8. It was not a car built for economy, few land yachts were, but rather for assurance. This was a wagon that could carry a family, their luggage, and perhaps even a boat hitched to the back without breaking a sweat. On the open highway, It moved with a steady rhythm, the engine humming like a low song, its suspension smoothing over the cracks and bumps of America's roads. But the country Squire wasn't just remembered for its specifications, it was remembered for moments. Summer vacations to the coast, the back stuffed with suitcases, coolers, and beach umbrellas. Long winter drives to visit grandparents, with children bundled under blankets in the rear seats, fog gathering on the windows. A family dog, panting happily with its nose pressed against the glass. These weren't just trips. They were rituals, stitched into the fabric of American family life. Picture a bright July afternoon in 1978. A country Squire sits in a suburban driveway, wood panels gleaming under the sun. A father ties down the last of the luggage on the roof rack while his children argue playfully over who gets the rear-facing seat. Their mother loads a picnic basket into the back. Soon, the doors close with a heavy, reassuring sound. The engine rumbles to life, and the great wagon rolls slowly down the street toward the open highway. For those families, the country Squire wasn't just a car. It was a vessel of memory, carrying them through the landscapes of their childhood. Today, the 1978 Ford Country Squire remains one of the most beloved station wagons ever built. It was long, it was heavy, and it was wonderfully impractical by modern standards. But it was also warm, familiar, and deeply human. For anyone who once gazed out of its wide rear windows at the endless summer sky, the memory of that great wooden wagon will always bring back the feeling of simpler times. By the mid-1970s, Dodge had found its place among America's great boulevard cruisers with the Royal Monaco. The 1977 model, though not as lavish as a Cadillac or as commanding as a Lincoln, carried its own charm. It was the car of the middle-class dreamer, a sedan that balanced presence with practicality, offering a taste of land yacht comfort without straying too far into extravagance. The Royal Monaco was large, stretching close to 225 inches, its broad body framed with squared edges and a stance that felt both dignified and approachable. One of its most distinctive touches was its hidden headlamps, a feature that lent the front end a mysterious, almost aristocratic look when the lights were tucked away. When they flicked open at night, revealing the twin beams, the car seemed to awaken, ready to glide through the quiet streets of suburbia. Step inside, and you'd find a world built with simple luxuries in mind. Vinyl seats were standard, easy to clean and durable, though cloth options were available for those who wanted a softer touch. The dashboard was broad, with wood grain trim that carried a sense of warmth, even if it wasn't real wood. The ride itself was what owners cherished most, smooth, cushioned, and forgiving. Dodge had tuned the suspension to soak up the bumps of America's aging roadways, letting families travel long distances without complaint. The engine choices reflected the times. Under the hood, buyers could opt for a modest V8 or, for those who wanted more confidence, the 400 or even the 440 cubic inch power plants. It wasn't built to be flashy, but it was steady, capable of moving a full load of passengers and luggage without strain. In an era when gasoline was expensive and worries about fuel economy began to creep into the national conversation, the Royal Monaco managed to remain a popular choice among families who still valued size, comfort, and reliability. But beyond the specifications, the Royal Monaco was remembered for the lives it carried. Picture a modest suburban street in 1977. A brown Royal Monaco sits quietly in the driveway of a brick ranch-style home. Its chrome trim catches the glow of the afternoon sun. Inside, a family prepares for Sunday dinner at the grandparents' house. The children climb into the back seat, giggling as they press their faces to the cool glass of the rear windows. Their father adjusts the mirrors while their mother settles in beside him, a casserole dish carefully balanced on her lap. The V8 rumbles to life, low and steady, filling the car with a sound that was as reassuring as it was familiar. Down the street they go, past neighbors mowing lawns, past children on bicycles, until the Royal Monaco merges onto the main road, joining the quiet rhythm of weekend traffic. It was not a car meant to turn heads. Instead, it was a car meant to serve, to be steady, and to create the backdrop for moments that mattered. Today, the 1977 Dodge Royal Monaco is remembered fondly as one of the last great full-size Dodges before downsizing reshaped the industry. It embodied a kind of modest grandeur, a reminder that not every land yacht had to be opulent to hold a place in the heart. For countless families, it was the car of everyday America, a rolling stage for the simple, cherished rituals of suburban life. Among the giants of the 1970s, few names carried the weight of recognition like Chevrolet's Impala. By 1973, it had already become one of the best-selling cars in American history, and the custom coupe of that year embodied everything people loved about the model: size, style, and a sense of accessibility that made it a part of everyday life. The '73 Impala was long, more than 220 inches of steel and chrome, yet it wore its length gracefully. The custom coupe featured a sweeping roofline that curved gently into a wide rear window, a design that gave the car a sleek, almost fastback appearance while still holding the presence of a full-sized land yacht. Its broad grille stretched proudly across the front, framed by quad headlamps, while the taillights glowed like embers across the wide rear panel. Step closer, and you'd see why the Impala was so popular with American families. It wasn't as ostentatious as a Cadillac or as exclusive as a Lincoln, but it delivered comfort and dignity at a price that felt within reach. Vinyl roofs, chrome accents, and optional rally wheels gave it just enough flash to stand out at the drive-in or parked outside a neighborhood diner. For countless owners, the Impala was a way to enjoy big car luxury without straying too far from middle-class sensibilities. Inside, the custom coupe was just as inviting. Wide bench seats upholstered in cloth or vinyl welcomed driver and passengers alike, offering a sense of space that smaller cars of later decades would never match. The dashboard was simple, almost understated, with large gauges and a layout that felt intuitive. For many, the Impala was the car where teenage sons first learned to drive, sliding nervously behind the wheel as their fathers sat beside them, offering quiet instructions. It was a car where families set out on long summer vacations, luggage stacked in the trunk, children stretched across the back seat with pillows and comic books in hand. Beneath the hood, the 1973 Impala offered Chevrolet's reliable V8 engines, ranging from modest small blocks to the big 454 cubic inch power plant. While the oil crisis was looming just over the horizon, in this moment, the American highway still belonged to cars like the Impala, broad, confident, and built for the open road. It was not a sports car, and it didn't try to be. Instead, it was a car of balance, offering just enough performance to feel lively, paired with a suspension that smoothed out the bumps of daily life. Picture, for a moment, a rainy evening in 1973. A custom coupe rolls slowly through the city streets, its chrome bumpers reflecting neon signs in the shimmer of wet pavement. Inside, the wipers beat a steady rhythm while the AM radio hums softly. The car is not in a hurry. It moves with calm assurance, carrying its passengers home through the glow of streetlights. For those who remember, that image is inseparable from the feel of the decade itself. When cars were big, streets were wide, and there always seemed to be room to glide a little slower through the night. The 1973 Chevrolet Impala Custom Coupe remains an icon not just for its sales success, but for its place in memory. It was the family car, the teenager's first car, the backdrop for dates, road trips, and ordinary drives that became extraordinary in hindsight. It is remembered today as one of the true giants of the 1970s, not the most expensive, not the most powerful, but perhaps the most beloved. If there was one car that truly symbolized the promise of affordable luxury in 1970s America, it was the Ford LTD. At more than 220 inches long, this full-sized sedan was as commanding as any Cadillac or Lincoln, yet it carried a price tag that made it attainable for the everyday family. It wasn't about exclusivity. It was about making the dream of comfort and dignity available to millions. And by the time its production years were tallied, the LTD would sell an astonishing 75 million units, earning its place as one of the most successful full-sized cars in American history. The design of the 1970 LTD was bold, crisp, and unmistakably American. Its wide horizontal grille stretched across the front like an open smile, flanked by hidden headlamps that revealed themselves only when needed. The body was long, with sharp, squared-off lines that mirrored the architectural styles of the decade. Solid, confident, and proud. Chrome accents highlighted its edges, catching the sunlight as it cruised through suburban neighborhoods or along the sweeping lanes of the interstate. Step inside, and you immediately understood why families loved the LTD. The cabin was spacious, truly spacious, in a way that seems almost unimaginable today. Bench seats, either in vinyl or cloth, stretched wide enough for 3 passengers to sit comfortably in front, while the rear seat offered enough legroom to let children sprawl out with books, toys, or pillows during long drives. Wood grain trim on the dashboard, padded armrests, and a quiet suspension gave the LTD an atmosphere of calm. It was a car built for Sunday drives, for summer road trips, and for the daily rhythm of commuting and carpooling. Under the hood, Ford offered a range of V8 engines, the largest being the 429 cubic inch. While the LTD wasn't built for speed or flash, it delivered steady power with ease, enough to merge onto highways confidently or pass on country roads without hesitation. Its strength wasn't in performance figures. It was in reliability, in the way it carried families year after year without complaint. For many, the LTD was more than just transportation. It was woven into the fabric of daily American life. Picture a summer afternoon in the early 1970s. A father loading the trunk with suitcases while his children run excitedly around the driveway, waiting for the annual road trip. The LTD, polished and ready, waits at the curb. Its wide trunk swallows the luggage with ease, and soon the family piles in, the father behind the wheel, the mother passing out snacks, the children peering out of the long side windows at the open road. The AM radio hums with the latest hits, while the car glides steadily toward the promise of vacation. Scenes like these played out across the country, at gas stations, rest stops, diners, and motels. The LTD wasn't rare or exotic, but that was precisely its charm. It was the car you could depend on, the car that became part of your memories. Looking back, the 1970 Ford LTD stands as a reminder of what American automakers once sought to deliver: a sense of luxury for everyone, not just the wealthy. It was long, dignified, and unpretentious, a land yacht for the people. There was a time, not so long ago, when the roads of America were ruled by giants. They were not living creatures, but machines of steel and chrome, stretched long across the pavement like ships adrift on asphalt seas. The land yachts of the 1970s were more than automobiles. They were symbols of a country's spirit, of ambition, of the belief that bigger meant better, and that the open road could hold all the dreams a family might carry. When we look back on them now, the Chrysler Imperials, the Cadillac Eldorados, the Lincoln Marques, and the Ford LTDs, we see more than their size or their horsepower. We see memories. We see fathers behind the wheel, guiding their families toward the shore or the mountains. We see mothers handing sandwiches across bench seats, keeping the kids fed and happy, while the road stretched endlessly ahead. We see children pressed against the glass, counting mile markers, their eyes wide with the wonder of travel. These cars were woven into the fabric of everyday life. They were there in driveways on summer mornings, polished and ready for the trip. They sat in church parking lots on Sundays, lined up row after row. They rolled through city streets, their chrome reflecting neon lights, and they rumbled down lonely country highways, their taillights glowing faintly in the dark. To their owners, they were not simply cars. They were companions. They carried birthdays and graduations, first jobs and first dates, vacations that became family legends, and countless quiet evenings when the only sound was the hum of tires on the road. But even giants must eventually fade. By the end of the 1970s, the world was changing. The energy crisis forced America to rethink what a car should be. Gasoline became expensive, and suddenly, length and weight were no longer points of pride, but burdens. Automakers turned to smaller, more efficient designs, and slowly, the era of the land yacht slipped away, yet their memory lingers. Perhaps it always will, because the land yachts were never just about size. They were about a feeling of space, of freedom, of possibility. Sitting behind the wheel of one, you felt elevated above the ordinary. The wide hood stretching out before you seemed like a horizon all its own. The soft seats cradled you like a living room on wheels, and the steady glide, that floating sensation over the pavement, reminded you that life, for all its noise and rush, could still be smooth and unhurried. Tonight, as we bring this journey to a close, let us hold on to that feeling. The memory of the giants is not about horsepower or chrome, but about the people who rode within them and the stories they carried. Though the highways may be quieter now, though the cars may be smaller and the times different, the echo of those great machines still rolls softly in our minds. So let the image stay with you of a long gleaming Cadillac or Lincoln slipping silently through the night, headlights stretching far ahead, taillights fading behind. a road without end, a car without hurry, and the comfort of knowing you are carried gently forward. And now, dear listener, as you drift into rest, may those echoes of the highway guide you into dreams. May the steady rhythm of wheels on the road become the rhythm of your breath, slow and calm. May the soft glow of dashboard lights fade into the darkness of sleep. From all of us here at Sleepy Town Radio, thank you for sharing this quiet journey through memory. May your night be peaceful, your dreams be gentle, and your heart be light. Good night. Sleep well.